This is a fictional and hypothetical scenario that explores a theory, principle, or hypothesis of imagining what would happen if we were living in a real-life time loop. The hypothesis asks, what if, at the end of life, we were reborn as the same person again, and this rebirth would repeat without end, acting like a time loop? With the entirety of the human race, every person is naturally born to live in a time loop, but each person forgets that they have already been alive before and they have no memory of their past lives. Ultimately, the aim is to find out if we were living in a time loop like this, how would we know anything about our circumstances, and how would we escape the situation overall? This hypothesis also reviews some insights into consciousness, what it generally means to be alive, or what we might expect to experience at the end of life. Would you be able to escape this time loop if it was actually happening to you? Well, hopefully, we will find out. So, let's begin. I am reaching out to you with this urgent document that I hope finds you well. I have incredible, life-changing secret information that many of our world leaders have, until now, kept hidden. It is time for the world to know the truth. I have, until recently, been a part of a secret operation run by many agents, servicemen and women, and scientists who I will refer to as secret agents or simply as agents. These secret agents have collectively been working on a highly secretive, sensitive, scientific, and globally operated black operation called the Loop. This has been active for hundreds of years, as you will see. I have managed to break free from this operation, with some help, in order to further aid humanity to understand the situation and also to escape this so-called loop. Some of you might believe me, and of course some of you might not. I sympathize with you either way. I know I cannot convince everyone. So let me explain to you what these agents have found, and also from what I have learned from my experience. You flow through each moment in life, and you feel as if these moments are new to you, just like what is happening to you right now. This moment for you right now feels new to you. In simpler terms, you believe you have never experienced this moment before that is happening to you right now, but these agents found that life overall was something they referred to as the loop. So, in a very simple, watered-down explanation of what this means, these seemingly new moments aren't actually new for you. They are moments that you have already lived through many times before. So, I want to try and explain to you how this loop works, as I appreciate this is a lot to take in right now. This loop is what we would ordinarily call life, which means you're born, you live your life, and when you pass away, unless you change the course of your reality, you will begin this life again from birth, as the same person that you are right now. Essentially, you have already been here before, and you will continue to live the same life over and over again. This, as explained to me, can only mean that time, in a classical sense, really is an illusion. Or in other words, the loop is time circular. So, every moment you experience and call the now is a moment that has already happened to you before, and this loop, or your life, will repeat without end unless changed. This doesn't mean reality is necessarily fake. Pain is still pain, your memories about your past are real, and this now moment you're in is also real. But these new now moments aren't actually new like we would ordinarily believe them to be. Overall, this life we are living isn't new, and you have potentially lived it many thousands of times already. What is unique, however, as these agents explained to me, is that when you are born again, you'll forget that you have already lived this life hundreds if not thousands of times already. So when people are born, from their point of view, They feel as if this life is entirely new to them, and this is because they have no memory of having been alive already. For me, I found it more insightful to say that we forget our memories about our future, at least when we are born again, and we start this loop from the beginning. Okay, this might take some time to come to understand. It took me a while to get my head around it, but that's fine, that's okay, that's not a problem. Apparently, according to these agents, the fact that this happens and we do forget our memories about our past lives was rather clever. They explained to me that it wasn't always like this, so, of course, I wanted to know more. So, this is what these agents had to say about this. This updated version of the loop includes memory loss from birth as a new feature to this game of life, as they would call it. They continued, "We live in a game of life that was created by beings who are in control of the loop, overall, or what you might call in today's language, the simulation. This simulation can be changed and we can escape it, but we are naturally born to operate or think this way, and we forget about our past lives. Naturally, this makes this game of life rather hard to play." From what I learnt, the purpose of our existence and the purpose of life or to life generally is to escape this loop and to enter a higher dimension, or in these agents' words, the aim is to win the game of life. This life and this simulation is very similar to our modern day video games, although this loop or game of life is much, much older than any modern day video game. Of course, we have naturally come to the conclusion that we are living in some sort of simulation today, but it hasn't been made public what kind of simulation that actually is. Hopefully, this will clarify that uncertainty for you. In this time loop simulation where we forget about our past lives, it didn't always work this way. As mentioned, we previously had this knowledge to our past lives, and we were all aware to a higher dimension beyond our own. We therefore knew that this higher dimension, or perhaps higher level to our existence, was true. It was a real knowing or a true fact. During this previous era, from long ago, this knowledge of a higher dimension, level, or plane caused many so-called religions, if you want, around the world to form. They weren't necessarily religions in a strict sense of the word. People didn't refer to them as religions at the time, so it might be the wrong word to use here. I understand language is limited. But what we can say is there are many alternative ways to understand and engage with this loop or game of life. Early on in human history, people were buried when they passed away to allow an honourable passing, which at the time was seen as the best way to foster an honourable life the next time around. So, in essence, a better life, or a better end to a life ceremony, was meant to foster a better life the next time around when the person was born again as the same person. Many religious figures have been known to sacrifice themselves, which was done so in the hope that it would help to save humanity, and to allow people to escape or to ascend the loop, or to win this game of life. Ultimately, people wanted to exit this dimension and end this cycle of birth and death, which then ultimately ends the cycle of being born as the same person. People knew at that time that if you treated others well in this loop, it reflected on your overall game of life score. But noble battles and honourable fights, they were just as good for gaining points, and it reflected on your overall game of life score. In fact, your game of life points and or score, or perhaps lack thereof, could send you back down to earth almost as if you were being trapped in a hell loop. Understandably, this was concerning. So, some religious figures began to explain and teach certain ways to live so that it helped people to ascend into a higher dimension or realm. Prior to this game of life being a thing, and prior to humanity existing on this planet, humanity itself was designed and then placed here on Earth. Essentially, humanity was preordained to exist here on Earth for reasons I will explain soon. But we weren't perfectly matched to exist on this planet. Our DNA is our coding, yet this coding could be, and was definitely, modified to give us an upgrade. This modification was added in and is now today called TKTL1. This upgrading allowed us to compete with other species of human and non-human-like animal, namely I always get this name wrong whenever I try and say it, Neanderthals, as an example. In short, this was so that we could survive against many other similar species, players, or various groups that already pre-existed on this planet. But why, you might ask? That's a fairly sensible question. I asked the same thing when I was learning all of this to start with. We were formed and sent here, or rather, we were designed, created, and placed here by gods of a higher dimension. These gods were known or called Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are descendants of An, who is the god of the heavens, and Ki, the goddess of the earth, and their primary function was to decree the fates of humanity. Through our design, we battled against other players, often dying in the process, of course. Yet, we were then reborn. But when we were reborn, we then had full knowledge of what we should and or what we could do better the next time around. This design feature made for a far superior race of warriors, ones that were efficient, unstoppable, and in many ways elite against other species. Humanity was an army to fight against other species, or to ultimately, in the end, fight the enemies of the Anunnaki. At least, this will be so in some future point. Unfortunately, this advantage has played against humanity, and this skill for warfare continues to be used to kill other humans. That being said, humanity has incredible curiosity, a willingness to diversify, and ability to transform their landscape to their personal benefit. This higher level coding, along with the knowledge on how to play the game more efficiently, all came from a past life knowledge and DNA coding combined. Therefore, our skills excelled rapidly over a very short period of time, as you can imagine. This has been something modern science has struggled to explain so far, at least publicly, so TKTL1 has a lot to answer for here. If this scenario sounds similar to our modern day video games, as it did for me, such like interacting with a virtual world simulation, having respawning capabilities, including tasks, quests, and computer coding upgrades and more, then really, from where do you think all of this knowledge came from to create these simulations or video games we have today? We can ask, quite rightfully, like I did, from where did this concept originate from in our subconscious? Well, as explained to me, all that we have really done today is we have forgotten the truth about our origins and our place within reality. The Anunnaki may one day return to Earth and reclaim what is rightfully theirs, which is us. The agents continued to explain during early humanity until fairly recently by historical standards. People were aware about these past lives and this scenario of being born again and again. So some philosophies actually grew out of this knowledge, and one of them was called panpsychism. All is mind consciousness, basically. And this is true, as our consciousness is our essence, our animation, our ability to experience the environment, and of course is our programming. Consciousness itself allows us to interact, measure, adjust, react, and interact with the world or simulation we see. We have a seeming narrator within us that guides us, like characters also do within video games. So all is consciousness coding, and we are therefore coding and or consciousness ourselves. Also at this time, a philosophy called Stoicism formed. and this became a strong proponent for a philosophy called eternal return. This concept of eternal return actually fits our reality rather well, and there was also a famous allegory that formed during this era called Plato's allegory of the cave. This allegory was meant to help people remember that the reality we think we are living in isn't real. A reality does exist beyond ours, a higher dimension, plane, or reality, or whatever you want to call it, and it is actually true or real. This came about at a time when humanity was threatened with this ability to remember our past lives, and this threat was to have this memory taken away from us. So Plato naturally was concerned about education itself and how one could help humanity learn the truth. Of course, that was only if this power to remember our past lives was ever truly taken away from us. The agents also said to me that the Indian concept of the wheel of samsara, which also began to form in Greece, occurred during the first millennium BCE. This was due to this awareness of our past lives, the time loop, or the game of life. Essentially, this knowledge that what one does with his or her life will affect the next life that they live, essentially when the loop starts again. Of course, this was of high concern. Sadly, some earlier ancient civilizations began making human sacrifices, as probably some of you know, for these gods, or rather for these creators of our simulation. These sacrifices were made in order to try and escape this game of life and or to ascend, to send a message to the gods. All of this effort was meant to ascend these people into a higher dimension. But as a side note for a moment, this higher dimension has been called heaven, nirvana, sarvaga, and many other names. But as human sacrifices were getting out of hand during this era, these creators, or the Anunnaki, steadily removed our ability to remember our past lives. This only started to happen to these civilizations who were making sacrifices, at least to begin with. Overall, this action by these creators managed to limit and prevent these sacrifices from happening. But there was a coming dramatic change that shifted humanity forever. These creators grew tired, restless, and impatient with the human race, and it was undecided whether to destroy humanity entirely or to remove their knowledge and memory about the creators or about the Anunnaki in some way, and to remove their knowledge completely from remembering their past lives. A worldwide flood, which has been documented in many scriptures and ancient texts, destroyed many living groups of humanoid players, and this destruction destroyed our knowledge about living through many past lives, ending most, if not all, human life in one foul swoop. There are 200 or more historical stories that share this same flood scenario, with the most famous of them all being probably Noah's Ark. From this point onwards, a second so-called New Earth was created from the ashes of this huge flood, roughly, say, 6,000 years ago. I can't remember when the actual date is. I'm sure somebody can correct me on that one, but this second version of Earth is where our memory loss life cycle truly began, which then created a new version or new system update. So this made it tricky for these agents, of course, to work out who lost this knowledge or how many people retained this knowledge. It's speculated that probably nobody did retain this knowledge and nobody actually carried on this awareness. So, leading up to the modern day, our purpose now is to ascend out of this matrix simulation, or just simply to win the game of life, as it were, prior to us losing this knowledge. Until the past few hundred years, we have only had small glimmers of this understanding from our past, as you can imagine. So, in a way, Plato was actually right to be concerned about education. But then, From this secret information, the forming world leaders set up a worldwide black operation to investigate this potential truth. The elite collectively wanted to work out if we truly do live in a time loop simulation. Naturally, this operation has been running for the past few hundred years now, as mentioned. And with this black ops called the loop, and with the data collected from many operations under the name of the loop and other various names, of course, they have confirmed that this is true. We truly live in a time loop simulation. However, with this new knowledge about this loop today, it can allow us to perhaps win the game of life, as these agents would say. I just remembered also, as an inside joke today, many of these agents would say, "Oh, you're winning," often spoken by dads to their kids or parents to their kids as, for fun. But one of these secret agents from long ago, who was and still is actually well remembered, was of course William Shakespeare. He and other agents during his time were aware about the loop operation and this seeming fact that this reality isn't real and we are born again and again. So Shakespeare himself decided to put a cryptic message in his play called As You Like It, found in Act 2, Scene 7. Quote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages." End quote. So before we go too much further, as an example of this loop then, and to help me explain why existence itself operates like a loop, you are now seemingly reading or listening to this new sentence. It is the beginning of this now moment for you. But you have forgotten that you have already been here before and read or listened to this sentence already. In essence, you are repeating this same moment again and again, seemingly without end and seemingly without any knowledge that you have already lived through this moment before. So what does this say about our reality then? Well, nothing is truly real in the way we think it is. It is the same as an old Indian Sanskrit word that says, or the old Sanskrit word Maya, which in simple words basically means it is just like what some of the spiritual sages have been saying for millennia: life is an illusion. Well, I'm here to tell you that these spiritual teachings were right, and many scientific studies today are starting to prove these Eastern beliefs and or traditions to be true. We already know that time doesn't exist, at least in the classical way we thought it did, and nothing in our reality is real in the way we thought it was. The Egyptians, as another ancient civilization, made great preparations for re-entering this simulation. They kept their wealth and possessions near them at the time of their death. This enabled them to live a prosperous life the next time around, as they were objects that had become part of their time loop. They erected and created many monuments and carved onto them many insights, ideas, and wisdom teachings about this simulation. They also made incredible technologies, at least with the time that they had spare to them, to communicate with these creators. They did this by connecting themselves with specific celestial objects, as physical matter is not really what we think it is in this reality or simulation. These Egyptians and Shakespeare alike, they understood that the physical universe was only a stage and it isn't real. So they used this knowledge to their advantage. We today are not the only sophisticated civilization that has ever lived on this planet. All that we have done is we have forgotten the truth about our reality. Yet this will change, and I am here to spread this knowledge about the loop, the knowledge that has been kept hidden from us for all of this time. Information is always changing and updating, even during our modern era. 3 scientists have been recently awarded the Nobel Prize for proving true, during 2022, the theory that the universe is not locally real. This only supports the loop itself as being real and provides evidence that the physical universe is not real in the way we think it is. Science, at least publicly, is catching up with this truth about our reality. The wealthy elite of this world who invest their money into these scientific research studies, they are finding the answers that they need to prove true that life is both a simulation and also a time loop. The black operation itself only runs to benefit these elite that live among us in our society. But getting back to the real world, not all is lost and there is no need to be sad. Things can change, and because of your now new knowledge about the loop, you can seemingly escape this loop itself, right? Well, not too fast. You haven't escaped from anything just yet, and this is because this loop is truly real. Therefore, nothing was actually real as we previously assumed. You now realize that you are seemingly stuck in a never-ending time loop, which isn't that fantastic when you come to terms with it. And what this means is, you are now in this same situation those ancient people were in, and you are now fully aware to this time loop, or perhaps game of life. For a modern interpretation of this strange scenario, it is similar to a character by the name of Neo in a film called The Matrix. Neo went from eating food that looked amazing, living a life unaware to the truth about his reality, and worked a pretty mundane job. But he went from this particular scenario to eating cave-produced porridge slop instead. Thus, not all realizations are all that amazing in life, and sometimes moving to the next reality genuinely sucks. Believe me, I know. So, in this case, in this new reality you are now in, you realize that you are stuck in a never-ending time loop, which is equivalent to probably Neo's cave-produced porridge slop. So you have awakened from the Matrix, or awakened to the truth about our reality, but you've now arrived at the next level, which is the knowledge that the loop exists. Hurrah! All I can say is, well done, congratulations. And what I can also say is, this was, is, and always will be an inevitability from now on for you. This is why you are here again, and this is why I am sharing this secret information with you. However, previously, you denied the existence of this loop, and thus failed the game of life, and were born again from birth at the time you passed away. So this is why you have returned to the present moment again. So hi again, I guess. It is situations like this where living in a time loop genuinely sucks, or can become quite confusing. For me, the film Groundhog Day came to mind when I realized the reality of our situation. I didn't want this to be real, and I did struggle with denial for some time. It is okay though, everyone has been through this denial and this issue and of this nihilism, I suppose. So there's no need to feel bad whatsoever. You're no different to everybody else who feels exactly the same. Regarding this document, video, or information though, some people have believed that it is actually new, has never existed before, or is perhaps fake. I don't blame them really. But this document is what is known as an Easter egg if we are to use modern day cultural language. So what is an Easter egg, you might ask? Well, Easter eggs are a way for game designers to reward certain players who explore the simulation and encounter hidden details through doing so. In essence, this document, video, or information is an Easter egg itself. Some people know about this loop already and are trying to escape it. You are not alone. Yet, due to the sensitive nature of this information, some world leaders are eliminating those who shouldn't be in the know or who possess this knowledge. Essentially, the elite do this before these people can escape, or before they can spread an awareness with others, like you. Putting an end to their life eliminates their memory, and thus their ability to spread this knowledge. This is something to do with control, money isn't real, society is a fake creation, blah blah blah, and all this conspiracy sounding rubbish, basically. I'm not sure. I trust everything these agents told me. On the other hand, some people have fantastic lives and they don't really want to change it. So these people continue to be born again and again without end, living an apparent life of luxury. Think of somebody like Elon Musk as an example. Others are wholly unaware to any knowledge about this loop, which turns out to be a vast majority of people, believe it or not. And you are likely to be one of these people who doesn't know much about this situation, the loop, or anything really. Same as me. Apparently, according to these agents, some people have been given Easter eggs by loved ones who have passed away. These Easter eggs are created by people who have previously won this game of life and can interact with the game if they wish. These particular Easter eggs are what we call today deja vu. Yet most people who receive these Easter eggs, called deja vu, deny the truth in them, or they think that it is all woo-woo and sadly ignore them. So, their loss, I guess. This loop or game of life is also why we have this crushing sense of responsibility all the time. It is actually the responsibility to awaken to the knowledge about the loop and ultimately win this game of life. For me, I previously put this crushing sense of responsibility onto social media, the consumer market, or onto social expectations, or perhaps on having kids. I'm sure you can relate to that one. Strange how things turn out though, isn't it really? Over the past decade, this secret agency carried out a run of tests just to see what some responses might be if this knowledge about the loop was ever to be exposed. Most people said, quote, it would break the universe if the loop was true. And they also said, it isn't the truth, I won't believe it, I'm not that stupid. They would also resist the truth by saying, our memories really are new to us, aren't they? I have memories and they are real, right? Others would respond by saying, other people will react to this research study and say it was fake, isn't real, doesn't work, or never happened. I mean, of course it's fake, right? No one is able to remember the future, nor are they that gullible to believe in that sort of woo-woo rubbish. People in these test scenarios were rightfully fearful about this knowledge of the loop, often saying that others would ridicule them, and they feared being called insane, of course, or had trouble in ideas of being outcast from society. Apparently, this lack of belief was a good thing for these world leaders, or for the elite. It meant that society could be controlled, could continue to prosper and seemingly improve forever, which is itself an illusion when you really consider the situation. It also makes this game of life much harder and rather difficult to win or escape. And this is because we take this game of life very seriously, or quite literally, as if the simulation were actually real. So, to explain this, and to explain what I mean when I say that, I'm trying to think of something. It is rather similar to watching a film, let's say, one we know that isn't real. So the actors and the scenery in the film come on so convincingly to us that it has us literally crying, laughing, scared, happy, everything else, as if it was actually real. This reality, or the simulation we're living in, it is the same as this film scenario or concept. We take life itself to be the real thing, or we take it to be the truth. And this is because we find this reality so convincing, either emotionally, physically, or otherwise. So I find it probably quite useful to compare the simulation to maybe a film or something that we might watch at the cinema, if people go to the cinema even anymore now. I must confess something though. For me, I was actually one of these test subjects myself that was included in these studies over the past decade, and I have escaped this secret black operation. The people running this operation are going to search for me, of course, and try to put an end to my life. I hope I have made made it clear why that would be. The elite and the many world leaders, they don't want this truth to escape, of course. It is far easier for them to keep society in check and to keep a level of control over society, as mentioned earlier. This won't work for me, though, however. They think by ending my life it will make me restart my life from the beginning again, yet I know something that they don't at the moment. I have written this document and created this video to help others escape this game of life, the matrix, the simulation, or escape this loop thing. I will share what I know so that you can also escape the simulation and win this game of life. Because of the results from these tests over the past decade, the tests that I was a part of, I expect that some of your responses to this information will reflect the same or be similar to the answers that these test subjects gave. Some of you might believe this information and some of you might not. I cannot convince everybody. In fact, this isn't my real aim. I know I can only help a limited number of people, so I'm hoping that even though this is the case, you will be one of those that takes this seriously. You will not find any information about this secret operation on the internet, hence the term sort of black ops or black operation sort of thing. All of these new secret black operations happen now by written letter or by paper transfer. This cleverly avoids, of course, internet hacking, and the information is thus passed on by human hand under the most strict of security measures. So you're not really going to find something that's black opted and doesn't really technically exist on the internet or otherwise. For me, I was part of a more friendly team of secret agents, shall we say. And these agents, like me, wanted the truth to get out. This is why I know so much about what is going on right now, and I have all of this information stored that I'm sharing with you. So really, I'm not special. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. I'm just very fortunate in that sense. As a response to this disbelief, and to help those who didn't believe in their circumstances, these secret agents would say to this group of test subjects, including myself, that if we were to really pay attention, we will begin to notice that everything in life is actually on a loop, such as night and day, asleep and awake, working and not working, the 4 seasons of the year, the female menstrual cycle, and so on and so forth. All things in life go around in circles or in loops. Of course, these are some of the more basic examples of loops to begin with in life, of course, yet may I ask you, can I ask you, what else in life do you notice that is on a loop? I ask myself the same question. And it isn't just me though, even scientists are now looking into loop quantum gravity as yet another example of these loops existing in our reality. So everywhere we look in nature, we will see many Easter eggs, points of interest, or giveaway clues, shall we call them, ones that are showing us the truth about our existence. Essentially, your realizations or your awareness to these loops within nature are all part of this new second level of existence. This second level of existence is to understand that this loop actually exists. Fundamentally, I wanted to aim this part of the document towards showing you that this loop exists. History and humanity have, of course, been formed out of this knowledge, and everything in nature is on a loop cycle, and everything would have to be on a loop because reality, or the simulation, is itself a loop system. Well, if you thought the first half of this document was wild, well, you haven't seen anything yet. As explained to me by these secret agents, this never-ending loop is the reason why consciousness itself exists. So, let me tell you what these agents had to say from what they have learnt over the past century. Quote, "You cannot experience nothingness." End quote. This is rather simple, really, but what this actually means has profound implications. So, how did they come to this simple yet profound understanding or knowledge? Well, over the past 100 years, this concept that consciousness never ends has been scientifically tested by these secret agents. They believe that consciousness played a crucial part in our loop of existence, or rather, game of life experience. Secret agencies started testing many altered states of consciousness over the past century, looking at native tribes, alternative ways of living, and they also began to take an interest in psychedelics. This endeavour, and the many secret scientific research studies that have developed out of this quest for knowledge, however, happened to indirectly inspire part of the 1960s counterculture movement, which I thought personally was quite mind-blowing. During the mid-20th century, the elite who were funding these secretive operations, they didn't want the average layperson to work out the same answers that they had. Again, this is possibly linked to the control and power. So, by order of the elite, many strict efforts were implemented to prevent the use of psychedelics amongst the average person, hence the 1970s war on drugs. The issue was, if the general public could become aware to their own existence and live a life by becoming self-sustained, having the ability to think outside of the box, and being generally autonomous, then that sort of civilization would be hard to control. Therefore, more than just the war on drugs was being planned and put into action. Many disinformation campaigns, infiltration efforts, and the assimilation of the counterculture became a top priority. So, with enough money and with the secret agencies at hand, this was a swift and easy task to conduct. Unsurprisingly, many countercultures that developed during and after the mid-1970s were kind of set out to achieve the opposite of what the hippie and beatnik thinkers had achieved. At least that was the plan by the elite. The elite also wanted to exaggerate left-leaning ideologies so as to make this kind of mindset implausible to hold. Our culture has been twisted, augmented, and some might say scripted into the picture we now see today. In our 21st century, therefore, this bland, fragmented, undefined, and seemingly void nature of any strong or coherent subculture or counterculture is by no means an accident. This isn't to say that subcultures don't exist, but they are nothing like they used to be. In modern times, to really drive that wedge between the past and present, further misinformation campaigns have made it really seem nonsensical and outright incomprehensible to foster a genuine consideration to achieve the goals set out by the hippie subcultures of the 1960s. Of course, for the elite, they find the hippie subcultures so frightening and so awful, and it is a bad thing. But what I can ask perhaps is, who is it actually bad for? But anyway, turning away from this, regarding these secret research studies, various altered states of consciousness were tested when people slept without dreams, were under local anesthetic, happened to be affected by the use of psychedelics, or when test subjects went unconscious through other various means. Sometimes these test subjects had a blip in their subjective conscious awareness, which in simple terms means this person didn't consciously remember the time that they were unconscious. This means the person who was affected didn't remember what had happened to them under certain circumstances, at least prior to them waking up from an unconscious experience. This blip, loss of experience or loss of time, it didn't consciously happen for that test subject themselves. Many reports stated that these test subjects felt as if this gap of conscious awareness never truly happened for them, and that their awareness basically never stopped flowing. This small blip of conscious experience was called a gap in human subjective conscious awareness. It was named by these agents as conscious gaps. This was hugely important to their research studies, but these agents weren't completely satisfied with this result, and they needed to really confirm that nothing was truly experienced during this gap of experience. Through further research studies, and through the use of hypnosis and brain scans, these agents confirmed that something called the human subconscious was able to remember what had happened to these test subjects. So, human consciousness continues even when we aren't consciously aware of what is happening and can't consciously remember what had happened. Our awareness always flows whether we remember what had happened or not. Regardless, consciousness always continues. Either way, the experiences that we have through either the conscious or unconscious, it confirmed the hypothesis that consciousness itself always continues without end. These agents had confirmed their hypothesis through both historical data and scientific study that people have a never-ending flow of conscious experiences. Again, whether they remember the experience or not, and this was rather insightful considering the end of life, because consciousness always appears to continue. As a result of this research analysis, this highly suggested that through our subjective conscious awareness or experience, we are only aware of being or existing itself. We are thus unable to experience literal nothingness, at least as an experience in and of itself. This is because we are always exposed to a ceaseless flow of experiences, regardless of whether we remember them or not. Therefore, these experiential gaps between each state of being, they can't truly be experienced consciously, but these gaps can be experienced by receiving them again through the use of the unconscious. Again, this ability to remember can be achieved through the use of hypnosis. As an example, we are seemingly born within a loop of time, always coming back into existence as the same person after we have passed away. Yet we don't seem to retain any memory of this life we have already lived before, or rather, we have no memory of the previous life we have lived from the time of birth. And this is because the memory of our past life that came before us is stored somewhere in the unconscious. So this memory can never truly be received by our conscious awareness when we are alive. So from our point of view, when we are born again, we truly believe that this life is the first time we have ever been alive. These various studies over the past 100 years have helped to confirm the loop was real for these professional agents and has supported the overall Black Operation research program called The Loop. The aim from here onwards, of course, is control. The elite are trying to find ways to establish contact with the creators of the Loop program or with those who exist outside of space-time, known as the Anunnaki in physical form. The ultimate goal is the elite want to become the creators or to become partners with them in the long term. And of course, this has undeniable issues when we consider the situation. Also, over the past 100 years, these agents have presented themselves as psychological professionals or as normal everyday people. They went out to seek civilians who happened to remember their past lives. And why they could remember their past lives was linked with the unconscious and the fact that no system itself is actually perfect. So this ability to remember their past lives is known as a blip in this game of life, or it is a bug in our simulation. Many of these people experience these past lives have helped to confirm the loop's existence. Many secret documents have been kept hidden which detail these people, their past life memories, and what could be learnt from these such experiences. Some documents exist, apparently, that even I don't know about, so of course even I'm unaware to everything that there is to know. But people are waking up to the truth about our reality, yet it is taking too long. Things are urgent, as you can imagine, and the elite cannot become the creators or partner with them to control our simulation. This is why I, along with other secret agents, are breaking protocol, making changes, and it is why I am releasing this information. These agents want people to know the truth, and this is why they have helped me to escape this black operation program. Everyone who was in this group that I was a part of, though, sadly was eliminated. So, as far as I know, I am the only one who managed to survive. This is why this document is so important that it reaches you, and this is why it is important that you hopefully understand this crucial information that I have come to possess. What does this mean when we consider the concept of being specifically you as a person? What did these secret agents actually find, and more specifically, what does their research say about consciousness and reality? Well, hopefully this has been made clear so far. When you pass away at the end of your life, in your future, you will come back again as, well, you. So, this is to say and highlight two important things. The first point is to say, here you are in this now moment. You have already come back again, and this is because our reality is on a loop. So nothing is actually new, and this is due to our reality being again on a loop. So your belief in new things occurring is actually a lie, and life goes around in circles, quite literally. The second point is, when you pass away, from the perspective of consciousness itself, at the moment of you passing away, this new being who comes out of this universe will consider itself a new you in a new moment in time. This new moment is a continuation of your consciousness, at least from the perspective of consciousness itself. When you are born again, your past life becomes part of the subconscious itself and is no longer part of your normal conscious awareness. This is how our loss of memory occurs from birth, of course. Consciousness naturally forgets its own future events when it starts a game, so the person being born wouldn't actually be a new being per se. What this person has done is they have forgotten that they have already been here before, as has been explained hopefully throughout this document. This leads back into the first point, and this is how the loop essentially works. But this has only been about you, so what about consciousness itself for itself? Is consciousness able to exist without you as a person? Well, from the perspective of consciousness, from its own point of view, it always has a subjective experience of being specifically you. And this is to say that you will always experience this now moment from a you person perspective. So, essentially, from the perspective of consciousness itself, then, it cannot be anything else. It can only be specifically you. In short, consciousness exists as an I person viewing the world from that singular point of view, and this point of view as that I person is how every conscious entity exists or experiences its own existence. So consciousness for itself can only exist as a you person or as an I being. So Of course, to dig into this a little deeper, consciousness will always continue to have this felt sense of being a you person with each and every time a being comes into existence. So even when you personally pass away, you will always come back again feeling the same exact sense, the same sense you feel of being precisely you. So you will always feel like a you person, regardless of what body it is that your consciousness is a part of. This, of course, might be a bit complex to take in. So, as a scenario to explain this phenomenon, think of a newborn child. Now, from their point of view, this newborn child feels like an individual person, or they have a felt sense of being an I person, and they are watching the world around them. Yet from what we know now, one moment leads into the next, without end, and this always occurs even if we don't remember the moment that came beforehand. So if you continue without end and you cannot always remember the moment that actually came beforehand, then who is to say that when you were born, prior to the moment that came before your birth, who is to say that this moment which came before your birth wasn't actually you? The coming end of your life is an illusion in many ways, and this loop is, therefore, all that exists. Consciousness always entails a never-ending continuation of subjectivity, and subjectivity will loop back into itself, creating existence. So for consciousness itself, it is impossible for it to escape itself, or to escape a notion of being specifically you. And until you escape this loop, you will remain a you person without end. So, of course, to finalize these 2 points, then, you can never escape this deep felt sense of being specifically you, regardless of death, birth, or anything. To experience life is to be conscious, and from the perspective of consciousness itself, it can never escape itself. Consciousness cannot experience a felt sense of nothingness. So I was told, using this analysis, that even if eons of time were to pass by and no form of conscious life were to exist anywhere at all, as soon as consciousness emerges anywhere, so too does the deep sense of being specifically you. This gap of eons of time, it never happened, at least not from the perspective of consciousness itself, or from this perspective of being specifically you. The experience of life is never ending, death is an illusion, and essentially this is because there is no death. This loop, therefore, is almost impossible to escape, just as it was designed to be. But not all is lost. It isn't impossible to change this loop, and it is actually possible to escape it. So, how do you escape the loop and win the game of life? The only way to escape this loop is to write an article or create a video explaining how the loop works, what it does, and how to escape it. If you don't, you will be stuck in this loop forever. By creating something in your own life cycle, it proves to these creators that you know how the game works, and ultimately it prevents it from continuing. This is why I have written, created, and shared this document with others like you. We need to listen to these Easter eggs and take them seriously. Those who are in control of these loops, or those in charge of this game, or again to use modern language, those in control of the simulation, they can set you free. Also, in this game of life, there are many NPCs or non-player characters and enemies who aren't actually enemies. And this is to say that the concept of good and bad is a hallucination. And this is because, as said by these agents, all is one and one is all. Every player in this loop shares the same consciousness. Thus, to harm another is to harm self. If you harm another, it reflects poorly on your overall game of life score at the end of the game. Some people can be sent back down to Earth ultimately to live this loop from scratch again. This is so they can gain these points they need to win this game of life. This is known and called a living hell by some of these agents for obvious reasons. This is why some of people from history have theorized many ways to gain these extra points, or have created ways to live and act to gain them. To move to the highest level is to write an article or to publish a video explaining how this loop works. This only works because it is written about you, for you, and essentially by you. Therefore, you will eventually read your article again, and it will end the loop before it can even start. But when you ascend to the next dimension, you can choose to start this game of life from the beginning without any knowledge of the loop whatsoever. This ability to start the game of life again prevents yet another untold issue, and that is the knowledge and/or experience of having always existed, without end. Essentially, as made clear, this is because when you start again, you will forget that you have existed before, and it will end this knowledge of having always existed. Some agents have theorized that this is why this game of life continues to exist at all. This game of life is a game of forgetfulness. So, as a summary and recap of this document, I want to say thank you for reading and watching this document this far. I know this has been a lot to take in. I cannot convince everyone this is true, or that the elite, who you are unaware of, are trying to take over reality. I know that only some of you will be able to win this game of life. So, what about time? Well, you can think of time like this. Does a dog wag its tail, or is the tail wagging the dog? Of course, the dog is wagging its tail. But this is also the same with time. The present moment creates the past, not necessarily the other way around. In other words, the past isn't necessarily wagging the present moment. It is more true to say that the present is wagging the past. Thus, only the now moment truly exists. So, things can, therefore, come into your loop and change the course of your events. These events must be things that are substantial, physical, or could be something like this document and video as an example. This is how each loop works and starts. You essentially forget your memories of your future, which is a kicker to understand. I know, believe me, I've been there before. And finally, you cannot experience literal nothingness. Thus, you are only aware of being a you person without end. This loop is something you cannot escape from, because as soon as your consciousness began, or your game of life began, it can never end. So as long as you are conscious, you are in the loop. And this is how these creators design this game or simulation, and these are the rules. But the loop can be altered or changed, and you can potentially win the game of life. Consciousness can never escape itself. Therefore, this loop is something these agents, and this whole black operation have come to realize, that you, as a conscious person, can never escape this loop, at least not without some help. Good luck, is all I can say. When you understand each and every point that I have made throughout this document or video, you begin to understand and realize this loop is real, and this loop is you.